Picture this. You're a Bay Area teenager, and your parents have grudgingly conceded that in order to go to summer school to study for the SATs, you've got to be allowed to take BART on your own. You get up in the morning, take a VTA bus to your nearest station, and get on, awash in the feeling of your newfound independence. The landscape whizzes by as if you're gliding through space like some kind of no-clipping ghost. Still, one thing bothers you. You can only see to the side. Even though lots of interesting stuff happens inside the BART cars, you still wish you could see what's in front of you. You find that options for seeing from the front of the train are limited. BART doesn't hire teenagers as train operators, and sadly, no rogue operators have uploaded their own footage to YouTube, which just launched last year in 2005. So, one day, about 2 decades later, you take matters into your own hands. Cameras have been getting smaller, better, and cheaper. You make a plan. You'll need an action camera, adhesive, and good timing to avoid security. You anxiously clean the outside of several train cars, trying not to attract attention. A police officer asks why you're filming BART, and you play dumb. Finally, the right train and the right moment comes. You attach your camera and try not to look as giddy as you feel. It's going to be a long ride, and you hope your camera will still be there at the end of it. Welcome to Tunnel Vision. Doors are closing. Please stand clear of the doors. BART is an exceptional transit system. It covers an implausibly long 130 miles of track, connecting most of the Bay Area. This ambitious system was the first of its kind in many ways, from using automatic train controls, wider gauge tracks, and a whopping 1,000-volt DC third rail. But the most striking thing about BART, to me, is how narrowly its completion passed through the eye of history. BART didn't have an easy birth. It was the result of grueling advocacy to build community support for what at the time seemed like an impossible dream. Early BART advocates like Marvin Lewis and Bill Stokes understood the importance of selling the populace on the benefits of regional rail. Despite their early success in getting a transit district created, BART almost died several times. Marin and San Mateo counties dropped out of the original plan. Voters in the remaining 3 counties barely voted to approve it. Constant renegotiation from cities delayed construction as inflation drove costs up year by year. But each time BART nearly died, its advocates hung on, fought for more money, cut deals, and made appeasements, until ultimately on September 11, 1972, BART ran its first revenue service train between Fremont and MacArthur stations. Not long after that, a couple was married on a train between MacArthur and 19th, and President Nixon came to marvel at the US's first totally new rapid transit system built in the 20th century. Today, BART moves nearly 150,000 people per day and has totally reshaped the fabric of communal life in the Bay Area. BART isn't perfect, but in a way, it's better than perfect. It's the only compromise that could have worked, executed with the slimmest of margins in the narrowest window of history. BART is the kind of public benefit that we would consider utopian if it had not already been built. If we tried to build it today, the costs of track rights-of-way, freeway median construction, station land acquisition, and equipment would be astronomical. The sobering truth is, we did not have the technology to build BART any sooner, nor did we have the money to afford BART any later. The trains were exactly on time.
This is Michael C. Healy, and I was department manager of marketing communications, which included research and customer service, as well as public information. And also, I was chief spokesperson for the district during my period there. Well, I came in to BART before it opened, about 6 months before it opened, actually a little longer than that, on November 15th, 1971. I left in the beginning of 2005, actually toward the end of 2005. I retired from BART.
What's the funniest thing you think that happened at BART while you were there?
Well, there were a lot of things. There was one I remember shortly after BART opened. Some guy came into our office and he said that he wanted to talk to somebody confidentially. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I've got a guy working for me over here. You can talk to him. His name is Bob, and you can tell him what it is you want to talk about. Well, what he did was he told Bob that the devil was riding BART, and that was one of the reasons why BART was having its very early technical problems. And so Bob asked him, well, what do you think we should do about it? And he said, well, you can throw 3 coins on the deck and for the I Ching, and that'll take care of everything. Anyway.
Did you do it? Did you throw the 3 coins?
Of course not. And the guy then we never saw him again. That guy disappeared. But I always thought that was really kind of one of the funny incidents that took place. We also had a very young woman flasher who wore, it's almost a classic story, where she wore a long raincoat, and she would get on the train, and then she would open the raincoat naked and flash and press herself against the window of the operator's cab. Anyway.
I mean, the operators are looking forward, though. Did they even notice?
Well, she tapped on the door, sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, they turned around and saw her.
Was there ever a moment in your tenure at BART where you thought like BART might really not make it?
No, I never had that. I mean, there were sort of perilous times with labor disputes and then the Transbay Tube fire in 1979. And those were kind of scary times, but not really. I didn't think really that it was going to be the end of BART or anything like that. I knew we had a lot to do to fix some of the problems we had as a result of that, but no, I always felt BART was going to survive and flourish.
Could you say maybe, like, where do you think that confidence came from?
Probably within me somehow. I believed in the system. It was one of the reasons I even went. I took the job at BART. I thought that this was going to be a very important system for the Bay Area, and I thought it was going to have a very big impact on the future of the Bay Area, which it has. And I wanted to be a part of it.
And it seems that in the history of BART, there have been a lot of struggles, especially in the early sort of system map layout era, of like where all the stations would go, how they should look, and like, for instance, the Berkeley aerial issue. And I'm curious to what extent, like, you're very careful in your book to say that a lot of times the objections of these municipalities did like overall improve this system. And I'm curious personally, like, how much of that is sort of like, I don't know, you being careful, I guess, versus like maybe you really do believe that the like large degree of like discretionary review that BART had to go through in each city really was for the best.
Well, I do think that because after all, those cities were responsible for making sure that they got the best of what they could. And out of all that process, though, I think maybe one station, maybe two, were moved from their originally planned location. But in the long run, I think it all worked. And BART, has always been, and even from the very beginning, BART was always viewed as, at least by BART planners, as a major planning tool for the development of the Bay Area, particularly in southern Alameda and eastern Contra Costa County. And it's happened. Not only development around BART stations or near BART stations, but BART itself had a joint development program in which we invited contractors or developers to develop high-rise buildings and office space around and close to BART stations where land was available or where possible. And that's happened, actually, over the years. There's been a lot of development that was, in which BART was really a catalyst. And also in San Francisco. I mean, if you look at the skyline in San Francisco before BART, it doesn't look anything like it looks today. Today, it looks like Manhattan.
The Manhattanization of San Francisco.
Well, there was, yes. One day, my secretary buzzed me, and she said, there's somebody on the phone calling himself Danny Glover. And I said, you mean Danny Glover, the actor? And she said, well, that's what he says. And he says and I said, well, I got to hear this. So I thought it was a joke. So I pick up the phone, and I said, hi, this is Mike Healy. He said, Mike, this is Danny Glover. And I said, yeah, Danny, yeah, right. So, right, what can I do for you? Well, I want to make an appointment to come in and see you. I said, okay. I said, where are you calling from? He said, well, I'm up in Oregon right now. I'm working on a show, on a picture or something. I said, well, oh, right, okay. And so when do you want to make this appointment? Well, could I come in and see you Friday? This was, I think, a Wednesday that he called me, or a Tuesday, whatever.
You didn't think he'd show?
No, but sure enough, 10 o'clock Friday morning, Danny, my secretary came running in and said, Mike, Danny Glover's actually here. And so I had her show him in, and he had his nephew with him. And so the whole thing was he was hoping I could help his nephew get a job at BART. That's really what it came down to. So I talked to the nephew, and I told him to try another department and tell him that he was interested in working in that department. And so I don't know whatever happened to the nephew, but Danny and I became kind of friends. So he actually spent almost the rest of the day with me. I took him around and introduced him to various people, including my wife, who worked at BART at the time, at various offices. And then I took him down to the control center. He was absolutely fascinated by the control center.
I would be too. Michael, I gotta ask, did you meet your wife at BART?
Yes.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about how you met?
Well, what happened was I was introduced to a new girl in town. She was working in planning, and she was working for our lobbyist, I think. Yeah, that's what it was. And she was working in legislation. So anyway, she replaced another woman I knew, and I happened to be on that floor, and somebody said, "Oh, here's a new person. Her name's Joan." And so I said hi to her, and we nodded at each other, and that was sort of it. And
that was it.
That was it. I didn't.
You both knew right then.
I didn't see her for some time after that, and we got to talking, and somehow we got on the subject of tennis, and she said, well, I play tennis. And I said, well, I play tennis. So we had a tennis date, and that was sort of the beginning.
I love these one thing led to another stories. They're just so wonderful.
Well, we've been married, a long time.
Is there some aspect of BART that you think is like particularly underappreciated by the public?
Yeah, I would say the entire system sometimes. I mean, BART is a technological wonder. At least it was in its early days. And try to imagine. I mean, people don't really think about this, but BART overlaid this 75 miles. It's 75 mile at the time. 75-mile system over the topography of an already established Bay Area. That was a miracle all unto itself. And then, of course, there have been several extensions. And now it's, I think, about a 120-mile system. But it was a miracle system in my view.
Giant bureaucratic systems like BART often seem a little machine-like, especially ones that run trains. This may sound strange, but personally, nothing humanizes bureaucracy more than a little bit of petty corruption. BART's history has a couple examples that I find charming. In 1978, BART police ran a secret sting operation that uncovered 20-ish BART employees that were running a drug dealing operation. The employees, who were train operators, station agents, and maintenance people, used trains to move product around. BART PD embedded an undercover cop posing as a train operator who became well known for, quote, asking where he could get some dope. The one I really like to dwell on, though, is BART's 1989 arrest of 3 employees who had been printing and selling paper tickets on the black market for almost 10 years. Not much is known about how they did it, but anyone who's ridden before 2008 or so probably remembers the ubiquitous dudes who would try to sell you a discounted paper ticket at the fare machine. The old magnetic stripe tickets had a host of problems. Counterfeiters manufactured their own, cloned legit tickets, and even had a scheme to print them by tying a string to a bill and buying a ticket over and over. Nowadays, clipper cards have closed most of these loopholes, though some still persist. My friend Sam reverse engineered the first version of the card, breaking the encryption. Another friend, also named Sam, has a stack of legit cards she got as a perk from work. She refuses to sell them for less than 100% of their face value. As long as BART exists, humans will probably trade tickets on a secondary market, and I think that's great.
Oh, wow. Hello. Crazy to bump into you here.
Hi. I'm sorry. I don't remember where we met.
You probably don't recognize me. I changed my hair. Here, this will ring your bell. The doors are closing. Please stand clear of the doors. Remember me now?
Sharon? Wow, it's been so long. I hear you on the train like all the time.
Hey, my coworkers are at this party too. You can meet them. They're a bit fried from doing platform announcements for 20 years though, so just play along.
Oh, that sounds fun. Let's do it.
Hey guys, this is my friend Vincent. Vincent, meet George and Gracie.
Hi, this is George.
It's nice to meet you, George. What do you and Gracie do at BART?
My partner, Gracie, and I are the synthesized voices you hear while waiting for your train.
Wow, that's so cool. Do you ever get to do the doors are closing, please stand clear of the doors thing, or does only Sharon get to do that?
We only announce ETA, train arrival, and tell you when the train is boarding.
Here are some typical announcements. 10-car San Francisco Millbrae train in 8 minutes.
6-car Richmond train now approaching platform 1.
3-car Fremont train now boarding platform 2.
Well, it was nice to run into the two of you. We're going to go get some drinks now. See you around.
George, it's time to get back to work.
You're right as usual, Gracie. Goodbye and thanks for visiting. Say goodbye, Gracie.
Goodbye, Gracie.
Holy shit, those guys are absolutely cooked.
Right? They're ancient text-to-speech programs originally developed by Bell Labs. It's crazy that they're still kicking.
What about you? Where'd BART find you?
Oh, I'm from a website called naturalreaders.com.
Oh, neat. Is that like a company that sells text-to-speech for, like, industrial applications and stuff?
No, it's literally just the first search result on Google for text-to-speech. You can just pick Sharon from the drop-down and make me say literally anything you want.
Oh. Hey, you want to get out of here? We are now miraculously traveling 100 feet underwater. Soon, we will reach a bewildering 70 miles per hour in speed. BART has seemed so normal to me that it is only well into my 30s that I've stopped to ask, how on earth is this even possible? How do they dig a big tunnel through the bay mud so well that my only problem with riding through it is how loud it is? The answer, like so many other things in life, was that it was done in pieces. Specifically, giant sections of concrete tubes were floated out on barges, then very precisely lowered into a dredged trench on the bay floor. Surveyors used powerful laser beams to ensure that the trench and tube were lined up exactly right, which was a cutting-edge construction innovation in the 60s. You can think of the tube sections themselves as concrete and steel balloons that were welded airtight to maintain their buoyancy, then weighed down with ballast and lowered to the bay floor, guided by divers. These diving teams had to weld each section of tube to the next, spending hours in decompression tanks between shifts. On April 3rd, 1969, tube section number 23, the last of the 57 sections, was lowered into position. The excited crew members, believing they had been the first to break through the final tube section, got a big surprise when the last bulkhead was removed. There, on the other side, were two tube workers, Don Hughes and Shad Wilson, sitting at a table covered with a checkered cloth, as if in a restaurant, toasting their achievement with champagne. The tube section design gives it natural earthquake resilience. When the 1989 Loma Prieta quake caused over $6 billion in property damage, 2 trains were traveling through the tube. When questioned later, passengers on those trains were surprised to have learned that there had been an earthquake at all. The original price tag for the Transbay Tube was $180 million in 1965. In 2002, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission estimated that a new tube would cost up to $10 billion. So, we were lucky to get it when we did. BART's biggest existential issue has always been, and likely always will be, money. When BART's initial plans came together in the 60s, it was the first big new rail system America had built that century. Though Eisenhower had put the country to work building the national highway system, there weren't yet federal programs to fund the creation of new mass transit. San Francisco, Alameda, and Contra Costa citizens had to vote to impose a sales tax on themselves to fund the initial work, which barely passed. Today, such ballot measures would be even more difficult, as California's notorious Proposition 13 requires that all tax increases be approved by 2/3 of voters. BART faced bankruptcy several times between its inception and today. In 1974, BART was down to less than a year of operating funds before shutdown would be unavoidable. Historically, early American mass transit systems were privately owned and profitable, but the rise of the automobile made unsubsidized transit untenable. In September of 1974, BART opened the Transbay Tube for revenue service. Ridership immediately doubled, while BART simultaneously planned to shut down if funding could not be obtained. BART has always rode on the brink. Luckily, just weeks later, then-Governor Ronald Reagan signed a temporary sales tax into law, saving BART for another 2 years. We're still in the same boat. Just a few years ago, BART commuter trains were bursting at the seams carrying passengers through the Transbay Tube, but the pandemic has decimated the traditional ridership pattern. Car-brained ghouls are calling for austerity measures as if to punish BART, just as they have for the last 60 years. Things are a bit different now, though. A generation of Bay Area residents who have taken BART their whole lives has pushed local government to save transit. As of June 26th, Governor Newsom and the state legislature have agreed to an additional $5 billion for transit, temporarily saving BART from this latest fiscal cliff. Forward-looking legislators like Scott Wiener have proposed a bridge toll hike to continue to fund transit, which is still being debated in the legislature. We're not out of the woods, but we have a path forward.
Hi, this is Senator Scott Wiener, and we're fighting hard for transit funding. Well, BART is in a world of hurt right now. Coming out of the pandemic, BART's ridership is down by over 50%, and it's recovering. Ridership is going up, but BART is very dependent on fare revenue, and fare revenue just isn't recovered yet. And so BART is at severe risk of having to make really big service cuts. And we're working hard to stop that from happening, to make sure BART has the support that it needs to keep getting people where they're going all around the Bay Area. Yeah, so the legislature and the governor and the budget did allocate funding to help public transportation systems with operational funding for the next few years. It was not $5.1 billion. That was a inaccurate statement that some have made. It's $1.1 billion for the whole state. And of that $1.1 billion, the Bay Area receives $400 million over the next 4 years, whereas the Bay Area transit operational funding gap is $2.5 billion. So we continue to have a significant hole. BART is definitely the most struggling of the Bay Area transit agencies because it is so reliant on fare revenue. And so I've now introduced legislation to create a temporary bridge toll increase to fund Bay Area public transportation system operations.
Can you tell us a little bit about what I imagine are pretty elaborate negotiations to get the state to approve this funding?
Yeah, and I try to make the point to my colleagues that it's going to benefit everyone, even people who never take the bus, because if they're driving, if BART falls apart, there's going to be a lot more congestion on the roads. But yeah, this is going to be a very hard bill, and it's not at all guaranteed to pass. It's actually an uphill battle. I think when you paint a picture for members about what is going to happen if we do nothing to help these systems, it's eye-opening for them. Because again, there was a narrative, was always a narrative, oh, the systems are always struggling, they always say they need money, but it is absolutely the case in spades right now. And there's people sometimes also buy into this narrative that we just basically like opened up a fire hose of money on transit with $5.1 billion, which is not true. $4 billion of that $5.1 billion is capital infrastructure money that was allocated last year. And the Bay Area portion of it is already completely spoken for. We allocated it to various important capital projects. So when they, when I explained to them that it's $400 million over 4 years for the entire Bay Area, which is about 16% of the total 5-year operating deficit, that's eye-opening. Now, they may or may not come around to supporting the toll because, most people don't want to see bridge tolls go up. It's never a super popular issue, although it has passed at the polls before, but it's been a close vote. So even if this doesn't pass this year, if we have to bump it to next year, I intend to hold hearings during our recess in the fall to just keep casting a light on this issue because it's real, and we're going to start seeing service cuts next year. And coming into this year, there was, this is a year where we have more than a $30 billion state deficit that we had to close. So a bad budget year, and we came in saying, not only do we want you to reverse the $2 billion capital cut that the governor proposed, but we need to add money on top of that. I wasn't sure that we were going to be able to do any of that. And we were able to because we organized as legislators and the community organized, and we got very, very loud, and we were very factual in telling the community what was going to happen if we did nothing. And so we solved a portion of the problem, but not the majority of the problem. And we have to keep reminding people what is going to happen if we do nothing. And that's our job this year and going into next year.
You mentioned a couple of times now that BART seems perhaps unusually reliant on fare revenue. Like, why is that the case?
Sure. There's a metric called fare box recovery, which is basically the percentage of a transit system's budget that is paid for by fare revenue. And some public transportation systems brag, at least before the pandemic, they bragged that they had a very high fare box recovery. BART was something like 70%. Caltrain was about the same. I, for a long time, told these transit agencies that was not something to brag about, because if you are overly reliant on fares, that means you're going to have to keep raising fares. It just puts you at risk. And lo and behold, being overly reliant on fares is a problem when you have a global pandemic that cuts into your fare revenues. So BART got the double whammy. Not only did it see a collapse in ridership, as did almost all systems during the pandemic, but BART in particular was reliant on fares paid by riders traveling to downtown San Francisco. And downtown San Francisco is one of the slowest recovering downtowns in the country because of work from home. It is recovering, but it's very, very slow. And so BART has taken it from all sides. Whereas Muni, by contrast, Muni was much less reliant on fare revenue. It was only like 28% of its budget was fare revenue because it receives a big subsidy from the San Francisco General Fund. And so even though Muni is suffering as well, Muni was a little bit less reliant on fares, and Muni served the whole city and was not overly reliant on downtown. And so Muni is at 66% pre-pandemic ridership, whereas BART is at 43%. And so the lesson is that tax dollars should be significantly funding and subsidizing public transportation. Public transportation is a societal good for everyone. It's important for the transit riders so they can get around. It's important for drivers so that we reduce congestion on the roadways. It's important for our climate goals, for our economy, and we should not be forcing these systems to fund themselves overwhelmingly via fares. Tax dollars should pay for it.
How'd you get into it? Like, what motivates you to both take and work on transit? Like, is there a personal anecdote that you like to share on this topic? Any color like that?
Well, I grew up in suburbia. So I grew up, other than taking the school bus to school, that was the only transit that I used. We didn't even have sidewalks in my neighborhood, let alone a bus. And when I was in high school, I worked at the Burger King in my town, and some of the women that I worked with came from they lived in Camden, which was a low-income, overwhelmingly Black community about 20 minutes from my town. And they would take the bus, the New Jersey Transit bus, in every day to get to work. And that was the first time in my life that I met people who actually relied on the bus to get to work. And then I got to San Francisco, and it was like heaven, because as much as we love dumping on Muni and dumping on BART and dumping on all these systems, we are so privileged to live in a community where you can take a bus anywhere, you can take a train anywhere, particularly Muni. You can hop on the bus and get anywhere in San Francisco in a fairly reasonable amount of time. And most people, the vast majority of people in this country, don't have that privilege. It's a car or walking or nothing, and it's probably not safe to walk and not safe to bike. So when I moved to San Francisco, I was very fortunate. I've always lived in the Castro, so I've always lived near 2 subway stations and multiple bus lines. And so I just got used to taking the train downtown to work every day, and then taking the train to Civic Center when I was at the city attorney's office and the Board of Supervisors. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, I gave up my parking spot at City Hall. Even though I did have a car, I just never drove my car to City Hall. I would just take the train. There was no point in driving. And so it's just something that I've gotten so used to. And unlike some people who like transit, I'm actually a bus person. And even though I love trains, I love subways, I really, really, really love taking the bus, and you get to see the whole city. You don't ever get trapped if there's a breakdown. And so I really appreciate Muni's bus system.
Do you often get recognized on the bus? Is that like your number one spot where someone will go like, "Hey, that's Scott"?
I do. It's very rare that I ride transit, bus or train in San Francisco where someone doesn't recognize me. And it's nice people, engage in conversations. And a lot of times it's like people who are, on their way to work, or kids, college students or high school students on their way to school, and they see me and they're like, "Oh, it's great, you're riding the bus too." And I think it's really great for elected officials to ride transit, and for their constituents to see them riding transit. And I think it sends a message of confidence that that I understand some of the trials and tribulations. I have my frustrations with transit just like everyone else does, and I think it's just sort of nice to just be with people in this very communal setting.
What's like the funniest thing that's happened to you on transit?
Well, there was a time, it must have been 2011 or 2012, I was a fairly new supervisor, and I was traveling from, I forget if it was from Van Ness or from downtown, westbound, and as we pulled out of the station, the door slid open, and the train just kept going with the open door. And we were all standing there like, what is going on here? And we called the operator. He's like, I know, we're going to pull into the next station. And someone got it on video, posted a video of it, and they knew who I was, but I was on the video as a passenger, as a rider. And so, that video went viral and it made the news. And then there were some people saying, well, why didn't Scott Wiener hit the emergency brake and do something? We literally went and told the operator what was happening, and he, told us to stay away from the door, which we did. But it was like, why did Scott Wiener not put his Superman cape on and save the day? But that was sort of, I don't want to say funny because it was dangerous, but it was, shall we say, a very interesting, unique experience on transit.
Arriving at Orinda. Now boarding at Orinda. This is a yellow line train to Antioch. The doors are closing. Please stand clear of the doors.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Dwayne Deans. I've been a train operator now for 4 years. Previously, I worked at Comcast. Kind of being a transit worker, kind of my lifelong dream. It took me a while to finally get into it and realize it's what I wanted to do, but I'm happy I made that decision, and I love my job. So.
Wow, is your lifelong dream?
It was, but I denied it. You know, I come from a family full of transit folks. My mom, my dad, my great-grandfather all were involved in transit. So I've been around it all my life, and I've always been fascinated by it. But I went through a time where I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Let me do something different. I was fighting it until one day I realized, what am I doing? You know, this is what I love. I ride, I go to other cities just to ride trains and buses. Let me make a career out of it, you know, so.
Wow, you're like a true transit fan.
Yes, I am, yes.
It's not really clear to the rest of us how many train operators are like true fans of trains versus people who, you know, like they want a good job, you know, like how would you say the breakdown is?
Honestly, from my experience, I would say it's 90-10. People who just, hey, I want a good job, and the 10% of us who are actual transit nerds, as we call it. There are a few guys and the gals at the job who, you know, will talk about, hey, did you hear about the new Honolulu, you know, rail just opened, or how New York or Washington, D.C. isn't fully, you know, doesn't have ATO yet. You know, they've been down for 15 years with no ATO. There are a few guys I can talk about that with, but most people, they're like, what are you talking about? You know, they're just doing their trips and going, so it's okay.
Personally, I really want to ride the Honolulu ride too.
Yeah, me too. It's been a long time in the making. The only, I think, in the United States, at least, the only fully automated system. So definitely something I want to check out soon.
How do you become a train operator? What was that like?
Well, you know, you put in the initial application, and they have a series of tests, a written test, a situational awareness test, where they can basically make sure you can multitask when you're coming into the platform. It's like a computer simulation.
How do they test you? How do they know?
It's like a computer simulation. So you sit in front of a computer, and there's a screen that shows, you know, you coming into the platform like a simulation, and you have to identify what's on the sign, what that person, you know, and what people are wearing. The lady have a dog with her.
So you have to like memorize the scene that's in front of you and then answer questions about it?
Right, exactly.
Are you good at that?
I guess I was good enough.
What I mean is like I don't know that I would be any good at that. Do a lot of people fail this part?
Yeah, that's the hard part. Definitely is a hard part. Yeah. So it's just because when we're coming to the platform, you have to be aware. Of course, you have to pay attention to the trackway, but you also have to be aware of what's on the platform, what could be coming at you, you know, things of that nature. So you can't just be, you know, narrow-minded.
What's the number one thing you're looking out for when you're coming into the platform?
When I come in, I do a quick glance at the trackway, and then I'm immediately just seeing if anyone's too close to the yellow strip or making any sudden movements. I had that, what was that, last night? I was coming into 12th Street, and this lady was walking real fast towards the yellow strip. She ended up spitting right when I was coming in. She spat on the trackway, but I didn't know what she was doing. I thought she was walking fast to jump in, so I hit the stop button, you know, honked my horn, gave her a dirty look, and kept going. But things of that nature, you know, you got to be watching out for.
Yeah, wow, that's a close call. Do you have a lot of close calls?
Yeah, I've had 3 where people were actually in the trackway right when I was coming in. I was able to stop in time. They weren't being, you know, they weren't suicidal. They were just silly. This one guy saying I was trying to get to the other side, or I dropped my wallet. You know, why would you? Why would you jump in right then and there? So it shook me up for a few seconds. I was more angry more than anything, but I was able to continue on and just go to the next station. So yeah, about 3 times it's occurred. All in MacArthur.
What was it like the first time you got to ride the train as an operator? Because I imagine you've done simulations and stuff before, but there's nothing like the real thing. Like,
nothing like the real thing. Yeah.
Did you remember that day? What were you feeling?
I remember that day because the one thing I remember that stood out was when you're a passenger, you can't tell whether the elevation, you feel it's like it's a straight line, just you're going straight. But I noticed that we were going like on declines and kind of uphill. So like the Transbay Tube isn't just a straight shot. It has various elevations. So that tripped me out. I'll never forget seeing that. Like, wow, we're kind of, elevating right now, or we're going downhill. We're increasing speed because we're going downhill a little bit, on a decline. So that is what stood out from that day. And just like I said, it's totally different being in the front, different feel, and just seeing the different light and the doorways and passageways. And yeah, it's something I'll never forget.
The next station is Pleasantville Overpass Center.
approaching the Concord Rail Yard. This is one of 4 rail yards in the BART system, alongside the ones in Hayward, Richmond, and Daly City. Here, cars come home to sleep and to be repaired every night. Like a synchronized pit stop crew, each night an army of maintenance workers descends on the aging fleet to get every kink worked out before the morning commute. The Concord Rail Yard is special for another reason. On the morning of June 19, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson stepped out of a helicopter here and presided over the groundbreaking for a groundbreaking transit system. The test track that he christened here later became a part of the very line we're riding on right now. Here's a completely authentic, never-before-heard clip from the speech that he gave that day.
Congress has voted billions of dollars to build highways, to build airports, to dredge harbors, to build canals, to improve river navigation. In the last century, Congress helped finance railroads and shipping lines, to open up new areas of the country, to open up new trade routes abroad. Now, Congress and the federal government must help to solve the problems of transportation. These problems require us to create new concepts of cooperation, a creative federalism between the federal government, the state governments, and local communities. And that is what our bill will do. When this bill went before one of the committees of Congress last year, a distinguished Republican congressman from Ohio said to Congressman Patman from my state, who was testifying in favor of the bill, "Why are you from Texas interested in helping the people of New York solve their traffic problems?" And the congressman from my state said, "Well, I'm interested because this is the United States of America, and the people of my state are as involved with the people of New York and California as the people of New York and California must be with the people of Texas." That is the kind of spirit that we need in this country, and that is the kind of spirit that I have found in California. The idea that we are 50 separate countries, that the federal government representing the destiny of 190 million people does not have a duty to meet the needs of those people, this idea is as out of date as the dinosaur.
60 years after LBJ delivered those remarks, the federal government put in $100 million towards BART's badly needed Fleet of the Future cars. In 2020, as the pandemic hit, Congress saved BART with a $250 million bailout. It's easy, as a Californian, to imagine yourself insulated from the ramifications of national politics. Just as it's easy for a resident of Palo Alto or Sausalito to believe that regional rail doesn't affect you. Both attitudes are wrong, because without either BART or the federal government, the Bay Area would be a desolate parking lot.
TAs.
Do you have a moment where you're like, oh, all these people's lives are like in my hands now?
Yes, I did. So when I got here, I got to BART, pre-COVID, of course, so when every train in the morning was just packed. And I remember was taking a train from the East Bay into the Tube, and just seeing how packed it was. And I think like a packed train was like 2,000 people. So I thought about that, like, wow, like 2,000 people. What if something did happen? Like, I don't know, fire started or the train just stopped in the Transbay Tube. I'm responsible for these 2,000 people, So I used to think about that all the time. I don't think about that as much because I'm a little more seasoned, so I know what I would do. When I first started, it was like, what do I do if this happened? What happened? You would get anxious, so about just thinking about that. You have all these people, and if something happens, they're going to look to you for answers.
What's the kind of thing that can go wrong that you need to be ready to deal with?
The most common thing we get is mechanical issues. Like I had during my training, one of the brakes, one of the cars just wouldn't work properly or started to smoke. It basically needed to be the brakes needed to be what we call cut out or just stop from being used in that particular car. So you have to go back there, get a few levers, make sure everything's corrected.
Wait,
and
so
then head back.
You run back to the malfunctioning car and like just pop a wrench out and like fix the brakes right there?
Mm-hmm, yep.
How long does that take?
If you know if you know what car it is, it can be pretty fast. Sometimes in the older trains, it took a while to figure it out. You'd have to go car to car to car to car. That's the great thing about the new train. It tells you right away where the problem car is.
Wow.
And you can go right to it. So.
Fleet of the future, baby.
Yes, I love it.
What's like the funniest thing that's happened to you on the train?
This is the most cool. It happened a couple of months ago. So I'm a transit nerd and also I'm a sports nerd. So I was playing in MacArthur and I see this tall guy on the platform. And I was like, that looks like this basketball player named Mark Madsen. He used to play for the Lakers. I said, well, why would he be in MacArthur in Oakland at 4:30 in the afternoon? Then it hit me. He's the new coach of the Cal Bears basketball team.
I didn't know
that. I was like, wait. So I got to the end of the line. I broke out my phone. I was like, maybe let me say something on Twitter. So I sent a tweet saying, hey, I think I just saw Mark Madsen. So I tagged his Twitter and Cal basketball's Twitter. So again, didn't think nothing of it. I do my second trip. I turn on my phone and my phone's blowing up because it was him. And he responded, hey, Dwayne, yeah, thanks for the ride. I love BART. It's all these random people who are saying, oh, Mark, you're so cool.
That is so cool.
So I got a big kick out of that.
Like, are all the train operators friends? Like, when you pass another train, do you, like, wave at each other?
Yeah, it's a courtesy. We all do. We may not be friends, per se, or, heck, I may not even know the person coming, because we work at different yards, but you give a honk, boo boo, wave, hey, how you doing? If I'm at MacArthur, we're at the platform at the same time, we always wave, hey, how you doing? All right, have a good one. We all do it. It's just sort of a common courtesy thing among train operators.
What are your hopes and dreams for BART in the future? Like, what do you hope will happen?
I hope we get past this current crisis that we're in. I don't think a lot of train operators realize what we're dealing with at the moment. I think the general consensus is, it's just, typical, because we're the employee, BART is management, typical, they don't have any money, they run out of money, whatever. We've heard that before, over the years with labor contracts. But I don't think, most of us realize the severity of it. So, of course, getting past this fiscal crisis, getting permanent, a consistent funding source, and then once we get past that point, just continuing So I like the fact that we're now getting away from okay, everything's about 9 to 5. All of our service is about 9 to 5 commuter customers. The fact that we're also improving nighttime service, off peak, weekend, so because people actually do take the trains on Sunday, for example, or Saturday. So continue down that road, improving our urban service, making sure, our not just our commuters, but it's just our everyday, folks, who may take the train from Fruitvale or Hayward or Richmond, some of the non-white collar stations. They continue to be taken care of like they have been, I think, since the white collar folks basically abandoned the system due to the pandemic. So I think just continuing, that change. But I think we'll have it. That's where our ridership will be with just everyday folks. So
Dwayne, you should be like a spokesperson for BART.
Thank you.
Pittsburgh Baypoint.
Thank you for riding BART. Please make sure you have all your belongings before exiting the train.
Just riding? You know where you're going?
Oh yeah, I'm just riding around. Oh, it's a little microphone.
Yeah, because I saw another thing popped on the front of my train. Is that yours?
Yeah,
You better get it off of there.
I will.
Yeah, like now. I was about to call it in.
I can't grab it from this side.
No, you sure can't, because I did see it.
You caught me. You just grab it, it's just me.
You know what? I really can't from here.
I was gonna get it off of the cars because it's like I was.
We don't have the other side.
And the cars that will be on the right side.
Yeah, well. Yeah, I had a feeling once I saw that, and then I saw that.
You figured
You got a problem. Well, dude.
Don't turn me in. Don't turn me in. It's just a little GoPro.
I can tell what it is. Let's see. But it's just, it's not supposed to be on the train. Yeah, I know. I can't
You mind waiting in the car, Arthur? I can grab it off.
I'm not driving this anymore. Somebody else is.
100% it won't cause a problem. It's just stuck on there full of
Well,
tape.
you know what, dude? You say that, and then there's other considerations that you may not even consider
That's fair enough.
about terrorists and where it goes.
I
and
totally
stuff like
understand.
That. So that's. I strongly suggest you get it off as smooth as possible.
Oh well, next
You're
time.
gonna have a right-hand side at Pleasant Hill.
Pleasant Hill? Okay.
Yeah, because you're gonna be left-hand, Baypoint, North Concord, but you have a right hand at Pleasant Hill.
2 stops, yeah. Hey, I appreciate it.
Yeah. You don't seem like a bad guy, but that information, like stuff in the tube, and we don't try to put videos out.
I just thought it was a really beautiful ride.
I understand. I understand. Just